and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Europe is preparing for war, not against Russia, but against the United States of America. Iran is already at war under the invasion of Mossad agents and the open threat in the last hour that America is going to start missile strikes against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Cuba is being openly threatened with war. Anyone old enough will remember when that happened before. Colombia openly threatened by war. And it's all started to go wrong for Donald Trump in Venezuela. It's all coming up here tonight, live from Kuala Lumpur, capital of Malaysia, part of the rising new world. It's the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway. The mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Oh, and not that he's really worth a mention on a night like this, but Lord Peter Mandelson, the erstwhile British ambassador to Washington, D.C., didn't see nothing, Gov, when he was a ultra-frequent visitor to the residences and indeed the islands of Jeffrey Epstein. He kept young girls away from me, needlessly, said Lord Mandelson, because I'm gay, even though photographs exist of Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein in the close company of the said nubile, underclad young ladies. But there are far more important issues to discuss this evening. First of all, Donald Trump has just said that he is preparing and ready for missile strikes against Iran. He simply can't stand to see the treatment of violent protesters in the streets of Tehran, you see. He cannot bear women being manhandled, though he entirely and resolutely backed the cold-blooded murder of Renee Good in Minneapolis, a young woman driving away from a school at which she had just dropped her 6-year-old child. He was perfectly happy to see Renee have 3 bullets pumped into her face by an ICE agent from a force which is now an occupation force in the United States of America. A personal Gestapo, a personal brown shirt army beholden to Donald Trump rather than the United States, and definitely not beholden to its constitution. He's going to start firing missiles at Iran, which will be the start of a very big war. Bigly, Donald, do you understand? Because I'll coin a phrase, Iran is locked and ready to fight your satraps in the area and to fight your bastard child of Israel. So that's the first of tonight's topics, but there are so many more. You probably heard that Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, had to ask to see the prison doctor this morning because he had strained his stomach muscles laughing at the debacle in the White House, where just before getting up to take a walk and look through the window at a non-existent opera house or whatever monstrous carbuncle Donald Trump is constructing in what was the east wing of the distinguished old lady, the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue, he begged the oil companies in whose name he had invaded Venezuela, murdered 100 people, and captured the president of the republic and his wife. The oil companies told him to go and take a hike. The head of one of the main oil companies said that Venezuela was uninvestable. It was simply not worth the hundreds of billions of dollars that would be required. Donald Trump seemed crestfallen. I saw that fake crest of his actually falling, revealing that which he had hitherto hidden. He had described himself Venezuelan oil when he forced the American oil companies into leaving Venezuela by the sanctions that he imposed in 2019. But such is the level of his advancing senility, his dementia, which is now clearly visible to anyone with eyes, just as much as Joe Biden's was clearly visible. He had forgotten the circumstances in which these oil companies were, as he put it, forced out of Venezuela. They had to remind him that they were forced out of Venezuela, not by Maduro, but by Donald Trump. But he had earlier described Venezuelan oil as so bad as not even worthy of laying on roads. Terrible oil, he said, like tar. Now he's telling us that the oil companies have to invest hundreds of billions into renovating the Venezuelan oil industry so what? That he can lay it on roads as tar macadam. Now, tar macadam is a very cheap product. It's a lot cheaper than renovating the Venezuelan oil company, particularly as the Venezuelans are on the march. There has been no regime change in Venezuela. The chavista movement is in ironclad control of the country. Intelligence officers, military officers, and even some political figures are now being arrested in Caracas for their role in the treason, the treachery that saw Nicolas Maduro kidnapped, illegally rendered to the United States and thrown into a dungeon where I do hope he doesn't end up being Epsteined. But the alternative to Epsteining him is to have him standing tall astride a New York courtroom, placing Donald Trump on trial. That's the second of the issues that I intend to deal with tonight. But there are so many more, I'm racing quickly ahead. Just because you land a boat somewhere 500 years ago doesn't mean you own the land, said the President of the United States of America, which came into being when white European settlers landed a boat on it even less than 500 years ago. Sitting Bull and Geronimo say, hello, Donald, hello. Your presence in our land is not legitimate just because your ancestors landed a boat on it 400 or so years ago. And this from a president who insists that because a book written by themselves claimed that God promised them the land of Palestine 3,000 years ago, that particular land claim is not just legitimate, but is inviolate. The situation between Russia and the United States has deteriorated sharply, with a measure that may very well chill any possibility to freezing point, as it is in Moscow, freezing point in relations between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. It is the case that the Americans have more or less admitted, in any case it cannot be denied, their involvement in the Ukrainian attempt to assassinate President Vladimir Putin at his residence near Sochi. This attack, which would have caused, of course, World War III, nuclear World War III, this incident was reportedly one that shocked Donald Trump when he was told about it by Putin himself. But if it shocked him, it could not have surprised him, because the Ukrainians could not have launched the attack without the active complicity of Britain and the United States, but were undoubtedly involved in the targeting of it. It's a matter of ineluctable logic. But the fact that the United States was prepared to lie about its ignorance of this assassination attempt is now an established fact in Moscow. Trump failed a trust test which will not be easily recovered. If he was prepared to claim that he knew nothing about this drone attack when a swarm of Ukrainian drones was intercepted right above President Putin himself, then they're prepared to lie about everything. Some of us have always stated that they completely failed in their attempt in the Anchorage summit, in the spirit of Alaska, to live up to the commitments that they made in those talks. Some of us never believed that they would. Putin, it seems, did believe that they would. So the war will drag on, and it will drag on now. It's almost certain to a military conclusion, and the Russians have already decided. This week they launched 2 completely undefendable oreshnik missiles that traveled so fast nobody could even see them coming in. No radar, no anti-missile defense, nothing can stop the oreshnik missile from hitting its target. The Russians this time did not put a nuclear warhead on the oreshnik, but if they did, it would devastate Western capitals before it was even detected. Before it was even detected. And some European capitals are at very much greater risk than others. The hideous dogs of war in London and Paris in particular are cruising for a particular bruising. Britain and France have again stated that they are prepared and ready to land their own armed forces in the western part of Ukraine, even though Russia has told them that this would be an act of war. Even though Russia has told them that our soldiers would be legitimate targets and would be targeted. And there's only going to be 7,000 of them from each of the 2 countries. So 14,000. A kind of charge of the Light Brigade of the Crimean War vintage is deliberately being placed in harm's way by the 2 most unpopular Western leaders there have ever been. I need to stress that to our American audience. Keir Starmer's disapproval is now 66%. His approval rate is 11%. He's the most hated leader Britain has ever had in its entire history. And the French president is on 12%. So between the 2 of them, they scarcely breach 20% approval between both leaders in London and Paris. And in an attempt to get the public to look over there, they keep returning like a dog to its vomit to their plan to put their own forces in harm's way, extreme harm's way, in the Ukraine war. Both countries are involved with secret forces. Both countries have their secret services more or less permanently installed now inside the remnants of Zelensky's rump Kiev regime, but not for much longer. In Odessa this week, 10 British and French agents were reportedly killed in a missile strike which the British and French governments have still yet to acknowledge. Because they'd have to explain why these agents were there, without any parliamentary approval, without any public support, and without any transparency of any kind. So the war in Ukraine is now about to heat up despite the below zero temperatures. People of my age remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. And when Donald Trump declared again today, how many declarations a day of war is he prepared to make? He declared that no oil and no money will reach Cuba. Negotiate, he says, or face the consequences. The president of Cuba replied that the Cubans will fight America to the last drop of blood, and boy, I'm here to assure you that they mean it. There are 1 million members of the Cuban Communist Party, every one of them armed to the teeth, who will die on their homeland rather than see it fall into the hands of the gangsters who would return the gold-toothed emigres, of whom Marco Rubio is one, who treated Cuba as a bordello, as a casino, as a playground for the mafia, in the living memory of many people still alive in Cuba, because of course in Cuba you live much longer than you do in the United States of America. In Cuba, of course, your children are much more likely to survive infancy than they are in the United States of America. The Cuban Revolution will never be defeated except in the blood of 1 million or more of their compatriots. And Donald Trump would be wise to imagine it. In Washington, there's speculation that Marco Rubio, yes, the Secretary of State of the United States of America, will be the president of Cuba. I'm not making that up. Reported by Axios, I think, in the last few hours. Everything is being reported in the last few hours. But the reality is that the Europeans are preparing for war. They're preparing to garrison the island of Greenland. Donald Trump has moved into hyperactivity. According to the main newspaper in Britain, the biggest selling newspaper, the Mail on Sunday, on its front page this very day, Trump has ordered the Pentagon to prepare a plan for the invasion of the sovereign territory of its most obeisant ally, Denmark. Never mind Nicolas Maduro straining his stomach muscles with laughter. I'm doing the same over Greenland. It won't be long before you hear that the narco-terrorist Eskimos on Greenland are preparing to acquire nuclear and chemical and biological warfare, and that the supporters of American democracy in Greenland, who are precious few, only 15% of the Greenland Eskimos want to be part of the United States. In any case, the supporters of American-style democracy are currently being tortured in underground prisons, and the United States simply has to come to their rescue. As I've said to you before, nothing would make me happier than to see NATO break apart. Nothing would make me happier than to see the European Union collapse in ignominy. A country like Canada describing today China as their #1 adversary in the world, when the President of the United States is openly threatening to annex a crown dependency, if that's what it's still called. Heaven help them if they're dependent on King Charles III. But a Commonwealth country is being openly threatened with being turned into the 51st state of the United States by force, if necessary, as China responded in response to the Canadian designation of China as their #1 enemy. They said, and yet we have not even once threatened to annex Canada and make it our 34th province. Well, the world is your oyster tonight, and Pepe Escobar is the best man in the world to talk about such a set of cascading global crises. Stay tuned. Pepe Escobar coming up right now. Full marks to you for your dogged persistence and your quiet and dignified insistence that you were right and I was wrong. I don't actually recall the clash that we had, but I would have to say that you are being proven right, and I am being proven to have hoped for things that have not transpired. Because I said all along, I repeated it 100 times, that the big enchilada, World War III, an intensification of American involvement in the Ukraine war, was more likely to happen under the Democrats, under President Kamala Harris, than under a renewed President Trump. And I'll go to the stake defending that position.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
You're watching the mother of all talk shows, coming to you live in the middle of the night. To my chagrin, they switched off the lights of the Twin Towers in Kuala Lumpur behind me, and so you cannot see it in all of its splendor. But trust me, I'm here, and I addressed a meeting this evening organized by a cabinet minister in the government of Malaysia, which was standing room only, and a pretty magnificent event it was. I hope that you'll get footage from that in due course. Here's the poll for this evening. Should we boycott Trump's World Cup? Is the Pope a Catholic? Do bears defecate in the woods? Are you seriously saying that a country that is in the midst of a civil war and which is threatening to attack and actually attacking several of the participants in the World Cup, and which has already banned the supporters and even the players of some of the participating countries from even applying for visas to visit the United States? Should we boycott Trump's World Cup? Well, it's a big, nearly 30,000 already, a big poll. Get voting. Should we boycott Trump's World Cup? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or if you're one of the chosen ones, on the patreon.com/George Galloway. You can also vote in that ballot box. It's a pretty dismal result for you, Donny, holder as you are of the FIFA Peace Prize. Now, if you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the international number beyond those two territories is 0044 203 966 2625. Pepe Escobar, to call him a man of the world would be a severe understatement. He's traveled the world more times than he probably likes to count, and he's an expert in all theaters. That's why he was the obvious guest for tonight. Pepe Escobar, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. I tried to cram the multiple international crises that are currently in play into a 20-minute monologue and failed miserably. I think I even missed some of the crises, let alone dealt with the ones I did get to in the detail I would have liked to. I suppose we ought to start with Iran, because it seems that following a color revolution attempt, which has so miserably failed, they're having to put up footage of Paris and Los Angeles pretending it's Tehran. They have decided that unless they intervene, the Shah of Persia, who I don't think has ever been in Iran, if he has, he was a small child when he was, will not be returning anytime soon. Are you expecting fireworks soon on the global level with Iran?
Well, this is something we should be asking the leadership in Tehran, of course. And, of course, we talk to our friends in Tehran and in other parts of Iran. They all say Iran is ready, politically, geopolitically, and militarily, like they were not ready at the start of the 12-day war. Today, for instance, there were massive popular rallies in Yazd and in Isfahan, among other cities, supporting the government. Tomorrow, there's going to be a nationwide rally in Iran supporting the government. Everybody knows who is provoking. It's the same old color revolution playbook. For instance, something that I saw with my own eyes in Hong Kong in 2019, attacking metro entrances, buses, public buildings. It's exactly the same playbook. Armed insurrectionists, as they are defined in the West, and of course people who are brought from outside of Iran, including ISIS cells, which were actioned by the usual suspects all across Iran. So the playbook is the same. In terms of popular support, they have 95, 98% popular support, and they know who's instigating all that. The problem is, this is a very complex environment, under inflation, under economic mismanagement in many cases, under sanctions for over 40 years. So yes, when you see economic linked protests coming, our color revolution guys always, they launch the same procedure anywhere. It can be Kyrgyzstan, it can be Syria, it can be Iran. But it's not going to work this time because Iran is militarily ready to anything that may come up from the Zionist international axis. That's the major difference.
Well, Trump said today that he was considering missile strikes.
Yes.
The Iranian response, I don't know if they can, but it would likely not, in any case, be intercontinental. But Iran's response can be guaranteed. Where would that response most immediately fall, do you think?
All American bases in the Persian Gulf. There's no question about that. And that's why the Persian Gulf monarchies, as usual, they were scared to death. And this could go even further beyond the Persian Gulf. It could get to United States bases in some other points in Eurasia, because Iran, they have 2,000 kilometer range missiles capable of hitting anything around Iran. And by the way, of course, Iran is totally surrounded by American bases and not the other way around, as people in the US tend to think, right? So they're ready to do it. They have some other weapons in their arsenal, which they have not tested yet. And they already said it on the record, IRGC commanders, now we're going to use them. The last time we were in Iran a few months ago, they only showed some of the stuff they have. And after the 12-day war, they accelerated their testing of the stuff that we haven't seen yet. And considering that now they are ready, and they were not before the 12-day war in June, considering that now the integration of the system between all levels of the IRGC, the army, the supreme leader, everything is much more organic than it was 7-8 months ago. If I was the Neo-Caligula, I would not try anything stupid, but he will, as we know, George, right?
And Israel, of course, cannot stay out of that. There are big demonstrations in Tel Aviv last night, demanding the resignation of Netanyahu, because they know that if a shooting war restarts, that Israel is the bullseye in the target.
Absolutely. And this, remember the last time Israeli generals forced some very well-placed players in Tel Aviv to call the White House and beg Trump for get into the usual suspect third channels, usually Qatar, to beg the Iranians to stop, because after 12 days, they were starting to destroy downtown Tel Aviv. And this was just with some of their missiles. So you can imagine what's going to happen next. And now you hear this not only from IRGC generals, but from politicians in the Majlis, the Iranian parliament. Okay, now we're going to go all out. And they are even studying, among several scenarios, a preemptive scenario. If they know that they're going to be attacked, they will launch their own preemptive attack. So the situation is beyond volatile. And of course, when you have Neo Caligula, every time he opens his mouth is just to pour even more fuel into the fire. All bets are off.
Now, I'm going to switch, Pepe, to another of your areas of expertise. I felt myself that Trump's statements on Cuba this afternoon were particularly portentous, coming on the back of the invasion of Venezuela, albeit a very brief one. They didn't have the men or the courage to stick around and face the millions of Venezuelans who are armed against them. The threat to invade and destroy the government of Colombia has now been succeeded or joined by an open threat of total blockade, extraterritorial blockade. Of course, the US has blockaded Cuba for more than half a century, but the threat to stop anybody else giving oil or food or medicine or money to Cuba is a declaration of absolute war against Cuba. What are we observing here, Pepe, going to the, if you like, the big picture? Is the United States seeking to settle all of its issues in its insultingly described backyard all at once? And what would be the implication of that for countries like China, for countries like Russia? Mightn't they seize the opportunity then to settle all their issues in their backyard, to secure their hemisphere?
No, there is no direct connection, George. And Western mainstream media, especially American mainstream media, are making this absolutely stupid connection. Russian diplomacy, Russian geopolitical interests, and Chinese diplomacy, geopolitical interests, they don't work like that. They have their own priorities and they follow their own, in the case of China, 5-year plans. In the case of Russia, very long-term plans as well, in terms of internal development and in terms of how do they react and organize their natural spheres of influence across Eurasia and in East Asia. There was something very, very interesting, Joyce, that I was discussing with some of my Russian and Chinese interlocutors. And this is a scenario, but it's very, very plausible, that Russia and China knew what was going to happen in Venezuela, and they didn't do anything to prevent it. That is, they didn't do anything to prevent the Neo Caligula to make a gigantic geopolitical mistake. And it's the famous, you break it, you own it. If he thinks he broke Venezuela, like he's talking every day, now he owns it. And what he's going to do about it? He doesn't know. He calls the CEOs of energy majors in the US, and they tell him at the White House, Venezuela is uninvestable. This is the words of the ExxonMobil CEO. And everybody else said more or less the same thing. In my latest column, I talk about that in detail. And this is exactly what the Chinese were telling their connections around Eurasia and Southeast Asia. If just one number, assuming U.S. energy majors invest $183 billion, and they already said that $100 billion is too much. It would take them 16 years to have Venezuela producing 3 million barrels of oil a day, which is pitiful. It's absolutely nothing. So Trump, obviously, he doesn't know about these figures. And even when a CEO of Exxon tells him in front of him, it's still, it's too much. So it's a total disaster in terms of the original planning, which was regime change. Okay, he got his mini Netflix with no season 2, 30-minute spotlight. He got Maduro. Did he get a regime change? No, he didn't. And he won't get it because the chavista government is in place. Delcy Rodriguez is very competent as an administrator and as a negotiator. She has to negotiate with the Americans. She talks with Rubio on the phone, and she's a very tough nut to crack. So Trump got absolutely nothing of his adventure. And now he's talking about invading Greenland, Cuba, Mexico, Colombia. Why not Patagonia? Oh, no, Patagonia, I don't need it because Argentina is already in my bag. It's a tragic comic in its stupidity, in fact.
Well, it's enough to make a horse laugh, the Europeans mobilizing for war against the United States of America. What does all this mean for NATO?
NATO is already de facto collapsing, George. And we're going to see a parallel race to the finish to see which one collapses first, NATO or the EU, or both at the same time, which is much more probable. We got to a point where the Europeans are begging for Trump to have European peacekeepers in case there is a ceasefire in Ukraine. And at the same time, they are desperate because they know that he's going to get Greenland one way or another. Whatever they do, whatever Denmark does, and whatever Brussels does. And they cannot escape it. So at the same time, they are begging. At the same time, they are scared to death. I think this is the perfect graphic explanation of how things work in Brussels.
We both have our contacts in Moscow, and I know that you will be in touch with yours. I have today been in touch with mine. I sense a very sharp deterioration in those who felt that the spirit of Anchorage, the spirit of Alaska, was going to lead to a negotiated end to the Ukraine conflict. I sense a sharp deterioration in the level of personal trust in the American president in Moscow. Do you share that view? And if so, what are the implications of that?
Absolutely correct, George. If we had a headline, the headline is, "The spirit of Anchorage is now a dead corpse." That's it. From the point of view of the Kremlin, from the point of view of the Supreme National Council in Russia, from the point of view of the Minister of Foreign Relations. And the straw that broke this steppe camel's back was the attack on the command and control center for the nuclear triad in Novghorod, which also happens to be one of President Putin's residences. So we have the Minister of Defense in Moscow calling the American military attaché and handing him evidence that the US was behind this attack. We didn't get from the MOD specifics. Like, was it the CIA? Was a rogue faction in the Pentagon? Or did Trump know? Did Trump didn't know? They handed out the technical evidence. So we know that they know, and the Americans now know that they know. So what they don't know is how Russia is going to react about that. There was a first reaction, which was Mr. Oreshnik handing out his business card near Lvov in Poland. And that was a message not to Ukraine. This was a message directly to the Poles and to NATO. And that explains why this past 2 or 3 days, it's a bunch of cockroaches in Europe. They don't even know how to deal with it. First of all, because they don't understand how Oreshnik works, and they don't understand the fact that they don't have anything against Oreshniks. And the fact that the Russians have Oreshniks now in place, not only in Russia, but in Belarus, and ready to deliver their business cards. So it's total panic. And that proves, among other things, our first reaction is that political capital that the American administration still had in Moscow has evaporated completely. Which brings us back to Lavrov once again, that you know very well. We know him very well. What he's been saying for the past year or so. The SMO will be decided in the battlefield. And this is now the official Russian position. And if you want to mess with us, we have our friends who have an intimate conversation with you. Mr. Poseidon, Mr. Bureshnik, and Mr. Oreshnik.
Now, one of the things I didn't have time to address in my monologue was the inky-fingered clerk called Johnheeley, who masquerades as Britain's Minister for War, who actually said today that he would kidnap President Putin if he could. Now, this is a follow-up to the question that was put to President Trump, who deftly avoided it because the very idea that anyone could invade Russia and kidnap President Putin, or that if you kidnapped the president of a nuclear superpower, that only one conclusion could follow. The British Minister of Defense saying publicly he would kidnap Putin and put him on trial. Have the British lost control of themselves? Pepe, are they mad or just bad?
No, it's worse than mad, bad, and dangerous to know, to remember our good friend Lord Byron. It's stupidity all around the clock, to remember Bill Haley and the Comets. This proves to all of us that these new so-called elites all across Europe and including the UK, degradation of educational standards, neoliberalism, brainwashing, cultural brainwashing, cognitive dissonance, you name it. And of course, this arrogant sense of we are still the dominant power in the world, Europe, UK included. We have an idiot like this saying something like this, which doesn't pass even if you were in a primary school, somebody says that, I say, oh, come on, shut up, idiot. So it is stunning, but it's quite predictable at the same time.
Extraordinary. Well, Pepe, we're not going out of business as geopolitical commentators anytime soon. I cannot recall a time when there were more plates spinning in the air than there are at this minute. Pepe Escobar, the great world traveler and world commentator. Thank you for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Now, how's the poll doing? 30,000 plus already. And most people seem to think that we should be boycotting Trump's World Cup. It's the mother of all talk shows. Short break. I'll be right back with your call. Stay tuned. I wonder if there's more to it, Anthony. She says not, but might she be preparing for a presidential run?
You very well may, but Americans don't like a quitter. So even if she was starting to speak some truth, we're not going to take that very well.
Fair point. Very, very fair point. But Donald Trump's political position looks to me now extremely isolated. He has destroyed a very considerable part of his most militant base. He hasn't just lost Marjorie Taylor Greene, he's lost Tucker Carlson, he's almost entirely lost Alex Jones, he has substantially lost the support of Steve Bannon, and many, many others are beginning to question his judgment, and some even to question his continuing fitness for office. So he's in a very weak position. But if he wanted to, he could take the bull by the horns on this Ukraine question. He could say, stop sabotaging me. Don't think by leaking things you're going to divert me. I'm serious. I'm ending this war. And I'm certainly going to end America's involvement in this war.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
You're watching the mother of all talk shows, coming live from Kuala Lumpur, and that was my good son Zane's arm just appearing in the corner of the screen. Please forgive me for that momentary lapse. Should we boycott Trump's World Cup? That's the poll this evening. A massive, massive turnout and an overwhelming vote that we should be boycotting Trump's World Cup, which, when you think about it, it's not really a question, is it? I mean, how can you possibly have a World Cup in America in today's circumstances, both domestically and internationally? It seems almost too stupid a question to ask. Well, Gurkarat in England, in Coventry, thinks that history is repeating itself. I think I know what he means, but let's check. Gurkarat, welcome to the mother of all talk shows.
Thank you, George, and I'm very pleased to be on your show and to discuss with you about all the similarities between the 1930s and the current times. In the mid-30s, there were the Olympics in Germany. Now it's the FIFA Cup. And, you know, like when Trump says about his plans to invade all these countries, thinking about the annexation of Austria, question to you is, what will be the Poland of this time when it is that the or the rest of the Europe or whatever the free world there is left do something about it? I forgiveness for my English because I'm not a native speaker. But what you mean? I mean,
actually, it's an extremely erudite question and a somber one. There are many people who think that this period feels like the summer of 1914 in the lead up to the outbreak of World War I. There are others who see it as you did in your inference to the prelude to World War II. And come to think of it, I should make the point that although I was scared stiff as a small child waiting the resolution of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis is child's play compared to the multiple international conflicts and crises that we are currently facing. You also put a great word in my head. Trump is promising an Anschluss of Canada. He is promising to take over Canada as Hitler took over Austria. He is presumably on the west coast going to simply enter Canada in the way that Hitler entered Austria. And as to what will be the tripwire, what will be the Poland, well, as in both cases, the aggressor imagines that decision will be made by him. Hitler decided to pretend that Poland had attacked Germany and then invaded Poland with all of his might and blitzkrieg. In the case of Trump, I wouldn't be at all surprised if Trump were to not even pretend that there was any kind of pretext involved in what will be his next moves. But I wrote a piece on Facebook today, which was a difficult one to write, which dealt with how, as a very young boy, almost 60 years ago, I finally was the worm that turned. I finally was the boy who stood up to a bully, a long-term and vicious and vile bully, and how it all ended up. And I feel, and not many will agree with me, They certainly won't agree with me in Moscow or in Beijing. But my own feeling is that if you don't stand up to a bully and attack the bully and attack the interests and ambitions of the bully, that the bully will continue to bully until perhaps you are so bludgeoned and browbeaten that your ability to hit back is dissipated. Somber words from me, somber question from you, and I'm grateful to you for the question that you asked. Now, I can also take comments. If you're watching on YouTube, you can just scan the QR code on the corner of the screen now. Mega John F1 says, cancel the World Cup. And Ferd 540 says, sport brings people together. Duh. So cancelling something everyone in the world loves because of a game show narcissist would only be to concede to his followers and that of his supporters. We should boycott Trump's World Cup. The World Cup can be moved. The World Cup can be accommodated in Canada and Mexico. The World Cup can be accommodated anywhere in the world, even at this late hour. But what you can't have is a repeat of 1970 Mexico World Cup, where a World Cup is being played whilst hundreds of people are being murdered down in the city of the stadia in which the games are being played. And that is what is happening in the United States. There is an armed occupation by a Gestapo, a brown shirt SA are occupying America, challenging the lawful authorities in states, challenging the local police, challenging the Constitution, challenging the ideas of the Republic. How you could possibly play a World Cup in a country where whole classes of people have been told they will never be given American visas and so cannot come to support their team in the World Cup. The Chicago match between Egypt and Iran, two Muslim countries, has been designated an LGBTQ plus game, where all the players, all the corner flags, all the paraphernalia will be in the rainbow colors as a deliberate provocation to Egypt, to Iran, to their people, their supporters. I could go on, but I've spent enough time on that. Stop and Listen sends $10. Thank you very much, madam or sir. America is the only nation in history which miraculously has gone directly from barbarism to degeneration without the usual interlude of civilization. That's a wonderful quote from Georges Clemenceau, a distinguished Frenchman. Fix in Man says, I'm sure Maduro sacrificed himself to save his people from being slaughtered. America murdered over 10,000 in Panama. And Crow Hawk says Greenland will be the latest country to fall to the Epstein wars. On line 2 in California is Carlos. Let's hear what he has to say. Carlos, welcome.
How you doing, George Galloway? Can you hear me good?
I can. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, man. First of all, I want to give you your flowers because I respect you so much and for standing up.
Thank you.
For your principles, for standing up about Gaza, for standing up what's going around the world, for standing up for the Venezuelan people that have been under sanctions for years and years and years, and for your true patriotic values. I've been a follower from you since day one, and I want to give my 2 cents on this because, you know, I find it ironic how they say and they show, about the Iran supposedly protest when Mike Pompeo is saying, Mossad is with you. And then, but yet they don't show the actual protests that are going in Israel. and about what Netanyahu and the protests that are going on currently right now in the USA. But they want to portray Iran as like as something else, but they don't show the truth of what's going on in the USA as we speak. They're trying to take the attention off of that and to put it into Iran being a bully or being treating their people wrong, when the U.S. is actually doing worse things, and with regime change and certain acts. I got brothers that fought in the Iraq War, and brothers that fought in Syria. I actually one of my cousins. Anthony Aguilar, the whistleblower. He was with them in a couple. Yes, he everything he said, he told me was true. It's just my cousin didn't want to talk about it because he felt like he was gonna lose credibility, but yeah, I just wanted to put my 2 cents in and everything that's going on.
Well, I'm deeply grateful to you, Carlos, for your beautiful words. They encourage me and they encourage my family that I'm on the right track and that what I'm doing is worth the trouble. And trouble there has been, as you will know, of late in particular. The Lieutenant Colonel Aguilar is a great American hero, and the revelations that he has made and the courage that he has shown are an inspiration to people all over the world. Irony doesn't really sum up the situation that we're in. I feel that we need a stronger English word than irony. This is off the charts. Trump is demanding that Iran doesn't shoot demonstrators whilst exalting the shooting of American demonstrators, while sending his own private army to occupy American towns and cities and terrorize American citizens, point guns at their heads, and from time to time discharge those guns into their heads. The President of France is denouncing the treatment of terrorists, for that is what they are in Iran. They're setting fire to people. They are murdering police officers. They are bombing mosques. They are setting fire to every private and public property that they can. These terrorists are being treated too roughly by the Iranian regime, says the President of France, whose CRS anti-riot police are a byword for savage barbarism. Everywhere in the world they know, and certainly the yellow vests who were out protesting every week in France, working class protesters, French men and women, were having their eyes knocked out, their heads blown off and beaten to a pulp by the French anti-protest police. I could go on, but suffice to say that irony does not begin to sum up the sheer perversity of the Western response to the events in Iran, especially as they know that Israel and the United States are arming and funding and propagandizing for these protests, which are the least organic protests you could possibly imagine. But I have one pièce de résistance. The former deputy head of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the former head of ISIS in Syria, the now self-proclaimed president of Syria, Jolani, is denouncing the Iranian regime's treatment of women. That's right. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Jolani is protesting Iran's treatment of women. Irony doesn't sum that up at all. Now, a big thanks to the week's top donors who visited the moats.tv website. We really depend on you, you know. I don't want to put that any more bluntly than that. We really depend on you. And this week, Neville Hamilton, Ryan Hamzawi, Patricia Williams, Reinhold Sturm, and Elaine Ryan were the top donors, and I'm deeply grateful to them and grateful to every donor who has or who will tonight gone to moats.tv and made their donation. Quick call on line 3, again in California. Barry wants to talk about Venezuela. Welcome, Barry. What have you got to say? Barry, are you there? Barry? I'll go straight to the break then, because the one and only Jackson Hinkle is up next. A star guest on top of a first star guest. You get it all here on the Mother of All Talk Show. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. I think you don't have to worry about these things with Mamdani, because my overwhelming feeling is that Mamdani is a phony. He has as much intention of doing these things as, you know, I compare him to a figure in British Labour history who became briefly famous in the US when Joe Biden was found to have plagiarized him during a presidential run some decades ago. But that man's name was Neil Kinnock. He used to talk all this flowery, far left guff like Mamdani does, but he had no intention whatsoever of actually doing anything about it, of doing any of it. So there's no chance whatsoever that Mamdani is going to defund the New York Police Department.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Well, should we boycott Trump's World Cup? You can vote on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway. You can vote on my X. You can vote on the YouTube community poll. You can vote on the YouTube stream. And of course, if you're in the creme de la creme, the vanguard, you can vote on patreon.com/George Galloway. Jackson Hinkle, wise beyond his years, a geopolitical expert, an expert on many different theatres, a widely travelled young man, is a star guest on the Mother of All Talk Shows every time he appears. He has his own show, Legitimate Targets, which is a must-watch if anyone is interested in international affairs. Jackson Hinkle, welcome back to the Mother of All Talk Shows. I don't quite know where to start, so let me start in your country, if I may, Jackson. The United States appears to most of us to be sliding into widespread civil conflict, maybe even describable as civil war, at the same time as threatening the peace of the world in 3 different continents. What does it look like to you?
I think if anyone is following the events closely in America, and if you're in America especially, which I'm not, as similar reason as you can't be in the UK for the reasons of our critique of these imperialist regimes. But if you are in the United States, you know that that is exactly where we are headed. And I thank you for having me on the program to be able to discuss this from the American perspective, because whether it's the Trump administration, the Biden administration, or a future administration, all we are seeing is a totalitarian control, censorship, and in some cases imprisonment, deportation, in some cases even the murdering of legal observers if they do so much as call out the crimes that are being committed by the U.S. state. Now, I don't really believe a lot of the intra-party conflicts and contradictions that the media likes to play up. You have governors, Democratic governors, saying that Trump is a war criminal. When they get back in power, they're going to do the same thing. You and I both know that. Our audiences know that. The American people, what they need to do is unite across all political divisions, because these divisions are really fictional. They are contrived. And they need to unite in a way that says, we are not going to vote for anyone that commits genocide. We're not going to vote for anyone who kidnaps sovereign, democratically elected presidents in the middle of the night. We're not going to vote for anyone who, I guess, is giving logistical support for assassination attempts on the Russian president. It just cannot continue.
No, but it is going to continue until somebody stops it. The bully only stops when they are felled. And that's a point I made just before the break. And I'm keen to test where that might be possibly happening. But before that, let's describe the state of affairs in the United States. I described the ICE as essentially a personal Gestapo. At least the Gestapo was the state police. It seems to me ICE is the Trump police, and they are threatening and even gunning down innocent civilians. In this case, a young woman, a mother of 3 in Minneapolis, and they're pointing their guns at people's heads entirely illegally all over the United States. We've all seen the pictures and the video, and that is bound to bring them into conflict with, however hypocritical, the governors and mayors and police chiefs who have the lawful authority and thought that they had the monopoly of that authority. And suddenly a private army has appeared in their midst, terrorizing the citizens that elect them.
Yeah, I mean, all of this started because a random young YouTuber or ex-user went to Minneapolis and made these videos about alleged Somali fraud of public funds being defrauded in these Somali education centers. And maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't. I don't really know. I didn't look into great detail, but it got heavily boosted on Elon Musk's app on X, best friend of Benjamin Netanyahu, the guy who's going to bring a bunch of AI technology to Israel. He just announced an agreement with Netanyahu. And it got boosted heavily. Trump sends in these ICE officials. ICE, we were told, was supposed to be utilized by the federal government to get rid of violent criminals and illegal criminals in the United States. And I think most Americans probably could get behind that. If you have violent people that are not here legally, then maybe they shouldn't be here. But now, as you mentioned, they're killing single moms. Mom of 3, legal observer. We've all seen the video. This woman was not trying to run someone over. They released the POV footage from the ICE agent who killed her. And he was like carrying a phone, or he had a camera or something, and he dropped it. And people are trying to pass it off as evidence that he was hit by a car. He was not getting hit. She was literally saying in the video, "I'm backing up now," or I'm gonna park over here or something. And then they just shot her straight in the face the same day Trump is threatening airstrikes on Iran, which we all know is going to result in the mass murder of Iranian citizens. If, in fact, any Iranian citizens that are protesting, many of whom, most of the violent ones, are backed by Mossad in the U.S., if they are killed, then Trump is going to do airstrikes. It's the most insane thing I've ever seen. And, I think you're 100% correct about the statement you gave on bullies, and that bullies need to be stood up to, because we've seen how it goes for countries when they don't stand up to the U.S. And I don't think North Korea would have tolerated 3 U.S. USS aircraft cargo vessels off the coast of their country doing airstrikes on their sovereign citizens for months on end, like Venezuela did. And countries should take a lesson from that whole situation.
Now let's turn to Venezuela then. It seems to me, although I had some doubts in the week, that the regime has not fallen in Venezuela. Whether there's weak spines in some parts of their leadership is still open to question, but the massed ranks of the revolutionary forces are taking the matter into their own hands, notwithstanding. People are being arrested for treason, for having collaborated in the illegal kidnap and rendering of the legitimate president of the republic. Roadblocks are established. There's a hunt for Americans. The U.S. administration has just demanded all American citizens leave Venezuela immediately because of clear and present danger to them. It seems that if Trump does want to enjoy the kind of Zoom call emperorship of Venezuela, he's going to have to get up. He's going to have to invade Venezuela. And he's not going to be able to do that, is he?
Well, if U.S. forces or troops or paramilitary personnel were sent to Venezuela, I don't think it would end well at all. In fact, I don't think I can even say how it would really end on YouTube because it'd be too graphic. Whether it's the standing army of the Venezuelan military, whether it's the People's Militia, which is 1 million to 2 million strong, whether it is the guerrilla groups that have been and still are living in the jungle and have been fighting for 60 years now, I don't think any of these people are going to be happy with U.S. military personnel, U.S. contractors protecting oil companies, and I think it will end very, very poorly. But you mentioned the Maduro regime minus Maduro, because that's what it is. All the key figures are still in place. Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president, is still there. Diosdado Cabello, the minister of interior, is still there. Pedrino Lopez, the defense minister, is still there. Everyone is still there except for Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. And the fact of the matter is, Trump is making a big show of the 30 to 50 million barrels of oil that Venezuela has donated to the United States after Maduro was arrested. Donated is an interesting word. I mean, it's basically seized as a result of, potential threats against the country once more. But 30 to 50 million is really nothing. It's a great way for the Venezuelan government to get the U.S. off their backs, to get Trump off their backs. Trump gets to take a victory. And that's enough oil to power the U.S. for less than 2 days. So it's actually minuscule. It's about a month's worth of Venezuelan oil at the current production rates, which everyone knows are extremely low due to the sanctions and the naval blockade. So I think Delcy Rodriguez is acting as a brilliant leader, walking a very fine tightrope right now, and trying to avoid future attacks while also maintaining the security and stability of the country. And we'll see where it goes. But right now, I can't say I'm disappointed in the Venezuelan leadership minus Maduro.
The threat to Cuba this afternoon by Trump was a declaration of war. As you know, a blockade is a declaration of war. All of the U.S.'s actions against Cuba since the victory of the revolution in 1959, almost in absolute real time from 59, almost from the victory until now, have been extraterritorial. But this seemed to cross a line. He said, no oil, no money, nothing will be permitted to enter Cuba, which is a declaration of a total blockade, which is a declaration of war. What's likely to happen there?
Well, what happens is either Cuba falls or other countries like Russia and China decide to do something about it. Everyone knows that the Soviet Union shared a beautiful relationship with Cuba and provided them a lot of support throughout the years. But after the collapse, who did Cuba turn to? Venezuela. Well, Venezuela has a blockade, and they're even seizing these Russian-flagged oil tankers, civilian tankers now, that are leaving Venezuela. If someone cares about Cuba and the future of Cuba, I think that what needs to be done is a military escort of energy ships, civilian energy ships, to Cuba's ports to make sure that the people have the energy they need, that they don't starve, and that the country doesn't collapse and Marco Rubio get to govern another country, I guess. It's insane to me that this is what the U.S. government is focused on right now. When our infrastructure is all dilapidated, our country's falling apart, people getting shot in the street. Anyone who thinks that, by the way, we're going into Venezuela or Cuba, which Cuba does have offshore energy deposits, but anyone who thinks we're going there to get cheap oil, cheap gas, and your standard of living is going to improve couldn't be more wrong. Did your standard of living improve after Iraq or Syria or Libya? The answer is obviously no, because we don't actually dramatically increase oil production when we go into these countries. The oil companies artificially decrease the level of oil. They use that as leverage against the governments that they are trying to control. And who really wins is Goldman Sachs, Citibank, Bank of America, Chase Manhattan, BlackRock, all these major hedge funds and multinational finance capital firms. And the American people get left out dry, as of course also the people of these countries we target.
Cuba wasn't the only country that Trump effectively declared war against this afternoon. Seems like every afternoon, every day, there is a new crisis launched. He said today that he is preparing missile strikes against Iran. We both know that Iran is locked and loaded. What are the likely repercussions of any resumption of American bombardment of Iran?
Well, Jerusalem Post just mentioned as well that Trump wants to assist the protesters, and he's talking about either cyber attacks in Iran or Starlink assistance, even though the Iranian government has already knocked out 80% of Starlink usage since the start of the protests, as well as potential military strikes. I think that Netanyahu is preparing for that. I think that everyone kind of understands that this is what was going to happen since the end of the 12-day war, because the goal has been, as U.S. generals have mentioned in the past, Wesley Clark, talking about the countries that the U.S. was going to target. Somalia was one of the countries they wanted to target because of its access to the Red Sea. Iraq was one of the countries. There's Yemen was one of the countries. Sudan was one of the countries. Iran is the crown jewel of these countries that just so happen to not have Rothschild banks and don't follow every single whim of the World Bank, the IMF, and the U.S. State Department. So I do think it's very likely. And what do I think is going to happen? Well, I guess Israel and the U.S. are caught between a rock and a hard place because they just divided the Iranian people with all these Mossad protests. Now they're going to unite them by launching airstrikes against them. Well, one last thing I'll say about this is I wasn't sure if it was you or Pepe who mentioned this when you had Pepe on, but someone was talking about the potential of Iranian preemptive strikes against Israel. And the fact of the matter is, Iran already is in a state of war. Mossad was funding these violent terrorist activities all across the country for weeks on end. Of course, there were some genuine protesters concerned about the economic issues, but the violence was all Mossad. So it wouldn't really be too out of the question if you're the leader of a government and you're having internal proxy conflicts against a foreign actor that attacked you preemptively several months ago, to make a decision like that. And I think just maybe that actually might quell how big the storm might become if, in fact, they decided to otherwise wait for Israel to launch the first attack.
Meanwhile, there is some good news, Jackson. Tonight, NATO seems effectively defunct. Trump said NATO is nothing without the U.S., and that's undoubtedly true. And the rump of NATO is currently sailing its warships and having its men pack their winter gear to go and garrison a place called Greenland, which Donald Trump has asked the Pentagon to prepare an invasion plan of. So, I mean, I'm so much older than you, but if you had told me, and I think even if I had told you, that NATO would end with the European rump fighting the American fundament of NATO, it would be a fitting end to what has been a thoroughly malignant organization throughout its entirety.
Yeah, you know, you're not going to hear me cry about an internal conflict amongst NATO powers. I'm not going to be the one that sticks my neck out to say we must stop this. I will say, however, though, that a U.S. Annexation of Greenland, I mean, it's clearly this Trump administration and future, you know, complete deep state controlled pro-war administrations after Trump. What are they going to use it for? They're going to use it to try and act as a direct power challenge to Russia in that part of the world where Russia has currently, you know, a really total grab on whatever they want to do in terms of shipping, in terms of whatever they want to do in military training up there. And this is, I think, part of a grand plan to challenge Russia. And you know, I'm very happy to see that people are waking up to the fact that Trump doesn't actually want a peace deal with Russia. He never really did. And this is just one step, you know, further on the road of escalation against Russia, I think.
Well, my last question relates to Trump. As I watched him be humiliated by the oil executives in the White House just yesterday or the day before, and I saw him rise, Joe Biden-like, and wander to the window and start ruminating about this opera house or ballroom or whatever it is he's turning the East Wing into. I, for the first time, questioned his sanity. I'm wondering if we're dealing with a demented emperor here, a kind of Caligula.
What sane leader would order the CIA to provide logistical support for Ukraine to send 91 drones to the home of Vladimir Putin in Novghorod? I don't know. That doesn't sound like a sane leader to me. Doesn't sound like a sane leader who in the first weeks of his administration, he sent Rick Grinnell down to Venezuela to do negotiations with President Maduro. He gave an OFAC exemption license to Chevron to do business with the Venezuelans. And then just, you know, less than a year later, we're out here kidnapping the president and his wife and injuring his wife. She got a big bruise and Band-Aid on her forehead. She's got bruises all across her body in a Delta Force operation. And, you know, God only knows what types of drugs those Delta Force guys were on when they went in there. They have a bad habit of doing that when they're on these sorts of raids, according to Seth Harp in his book, Fort Bragg. But, you know, this is definitely not a sane president. This is definitely not a coherent president. And I can only say that I am very, very worried to see where things go in the future. I guess the good thing is that it serves as a constant and further eroding of the legitimacy of that very seat, the seat in the Oval Office of the President of the United States. And people all across the world, but more importantly in America, are realizing that it doesn't matter who you vote into office. You know, both parties and some of these, you know, third parties, they're all controlled opposition, controlled figures, and they all want the same thing. They want war and destruction and more profits for Wall Street and the shareholders of these massive hedge funds.
He has also this week established a new doctrine. We could call it the Don Roe doctrine, which in short is that landing a boat on a piece of territory 500 years ago doesn't mean you own the land. Sitting Bull and Geronimo and their ancestors might have something to say about that, as might the Palestinians.
And an interesting fact about the Monroe Doctrine is the Monroe Doctrine actually said that Europe must stay out of the Americas, and the U.S. will as well. I mean, on paper, that's what it was supposed to be about. And then Roosevelt came in with the Roosevelt Corollary, which basically legitimized and put on paper the notion that the U.S. would get to do whatever it wanted in the Americas, and would get to resource, strip all these countries, and the Europeans still had to stay out. So this is really, I don't even know what to call this. It's just, it's the law of the jungle. And other countries need to realize that no one cares about international law. No one follows it. No one believes it. They are in the same jungle as Donald Trump. And if they don't start acting like it, they may become his prey very soon.
Yeah, amen. My thoughts entirely. We are always on the same page. Jackson Hinkle, the host of Legitimate Targets. Thanks for joining us again on the mother of all talk shows. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls right up to Gayatri's slot on social media. Stay tuned. His approval ratings are in the toilet. He won a huge mandate well less than a year ago, and he's thrown it all away. He has an approval rating of just under 40% now, and a disapproval rating of all the others. There are no don't knows in the issue of Donald Trump. And so he has maximized the number of people who hate him or dislike him, and he has systematically undermined the voting base that formerly liked him. And I don't know whether that is because of his donors, because he's intellectually challenged, because it's of his age. I really don't know.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Should we boycott Trump's World Cup? That's tonight's poll. It's almost a record poll. You can vote on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or on the patreon.com/George Galloway. Let's go to London for the next call, which is Hussein. Hussein, welcome.
George, how are you, my friend?
By the grace of God, good. I'm in Kuala Lumpur. There's definitely many worse places you can be. It's tropical heat here, and I know it isn't in London. So thanks for the call.
No problem. I mean, even the place sounds very, very romantic over there. But I heard the sad story that you're not in the UK, and I heard you on Tucker Carlson saying that that was the first time I heard you wasn't coming back to the UK. I was so disappointed.
Yeah. Well, me too. I have to watch Manchester United in the middle of the night, but more fool me after yet another disaster this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm a United fan, but I haven't watched them for absolute ages because of the absolute disastrous results that are happening. Anyway, but I wanted to get onto the World Cup part of the conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I was thinking that
go ahead.
Countries like Brazil and Argentina, South American clubs, they should for sure, if they're patriotic, they should say, we're not playing in the World Cup.
Yeah, and what about all these African teams? Africa has been described as a shithole by Donald Trump, and he's denying visas to whole categories of countries. So if you are not allowed to go and support your team in the World Cup, how can that possibly be a World Cup?
And you're absolutely bang on, absolutely on point there. But what I was going to say is that, I mean, stadiums being empty, they've always managed to fill them, George. They'll fill them with diplomats, they'll do it. But the fact that if clubs like Brazil, Argentina suddenly say, all right, we're not going to be in the World Cup, then all the African countries will say, well, if they're not in the World Cup, we're not in the World Cup. Suddenly, that's a massive impact. How can you have a World Cup without Brazil?
Absolutely right. And, you know, the civil conflict in the streets of the United States itself calls into question the US government's ability to host the tournament. The grotesque spectacle of Trump being given a FIFA Peace Prize as a consolation for not getting the Nobel Peace Prize was an early indicator that the meretricious, cheap, vulgar Trump gold lacquer approach was going to be the way the World Cup developed, even in the best circumstances. But since then, Trump has gone to war with 3 continents and is threatening even the 2 co-hosts of the World Cup. He's threatening to bomb Mexico and threatening to annex Canada, his 2 co-hosts. So, whichever way you dice it, this decision by FIFA, which was almost certainly an utterly corrupt one, has also turned out to be an utterly crazed one. Last word to you, Hussein.
No, I was going to say that, I mean, FIFA's already corrupt. We know they're corrupt. And they can be bought by money. But if players stand up and say, look, we're not going to play, big players like Neymar, Mbappe, these type of players say, this is actually terrible, it can have an impact. I was just thinking if the actual clubs were to come out, it would have a bigger impact. We can't rely on FIFA.
Absolutely correct. Hussein in London on the subject of tonight's poll, which I'll now close. 35,000 people have voted. Should we boycott Trump's World Cup? Yes. 90%, 75%, 83, 89, and 96% say yes. How about that? Well, there's a legend on the line. I'll come to her in a minute. Before, I must give a big shout out to tonight's top donors who've been on to the moats.tv website most generously since we came on air. Douglas McFarland, Kenneth Morris, Anthony Scannell, Ellie Newt, and Robert Harker. And many of those names I've read out before, more than once, so a very, very big vote of thanks to you for your vital support. But if you haven't given yet, please do at moats.tv. That's our website. There's a legend called May in Oklahoma on the air now. May, welcome back.
Hey, George. Good to talk to you. I've been trying to get through for quite a while. You are so popular. I have 3 things I wanted to talk about. First one is, I bet when you were young, you had no idea what a leader you were going to be in the world and how many people you were going to influence for good. And I just want to say how much I admire your courage, you having to live right now in exile and still never flagging on your support for, truth, justice, and what people should be doing is so admirable. And I just want to send love to you and Gayatri and your whole team. The next thing I want to say is, George, I want to make sure that people listening understand that the American people are not in support, for the most part, of all of this stuff that Trump is doing. He is obviously imbalanced. Something is very, very wrong with that man. And I cannot believe everything he is doing to threaten the rest of the world. I don't know. He doesn't believe in friends. I know that. I know he only believes in lackeys and people who can provide with him with something. The idea, he thinks loyalty is wonderful, but he's not loyal to anyone. And just the idea that you can live in this world without having any countries that are your friends. You make sacrifices for friends. You tolerate their problems and their issues and their failings. Doesn't mean you don't tell your friends how they can improve in a gentle way. But you don't declare war on your friends or anybody you want to be friends with. And just this duplicitousness and violence and aggression, most Americans are very, very upset with it, including people who were formerly his followers. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is a few weeks ago, we were talking about the spiritual decay in the world. And you were saying it's a shame that we lack leaders in that department. And I think what's important is that, George, we need to not depend on our leaders for our spiritual integrity. We need to say, I will not buy into hate. I will not initiate violence. I will not butt my nose in to the business of other people, other countries, other religions. And I will defend the weak and the helpless and the put upon. But I will not initiate force or hate. And that is the big problem I see in the United States and in the world, is people are buying into the politicians trying to make us hate everybody. You know, if they pick their nose in a different way from you, that means they need to be killed.
That's where we are. The points you've made are so pertinent, so powerful. Allow me, please, to respond to a couple of them, at least, May. As to your first point, as always, you are most generous and kind, and my good wife and my eldest son are sitting in the room with me and heard you, and I'm sure take comfort from it, for we are personally in a difficult situation. I will not go back to the United Kingdom until they withdraw their threats against my wife and their implied threats against my work. If they think that I'm going to go back and allow my wife to fall into their hands, or I'm going to continue with my television work in a place where they can stop it by one means or another, then they are misunderestimating me, as George W. Bush might have put it. But tonight, as a government guest in a magnificent country, Malaysia, one of the most successful countries and one of the most successful societies in the whole world, to have an absolutely jam-packed meeting with me speaking in English, and not all of them, most of them, but not all of them understanding English, and to receive the reception that I did was just truly humbling. People telling me, men, it's quite salutary, May, people who looked a decent age themselves, telling me they'd been following me since they were a student, young men telling me that they have been following me since they were children, was truly inspiring and a very good indication of the global reach of this program and our audience, and the clarity and purpose with which this program enunciates its own analysis of international events. And there are harder exiles to endure than to be here in front of the beautiful towers in Kuala Lumpur and wherever else we are next. So I can bear it, and I will bear it. If necessary for the rest of my life, I will bear it. And after me, my wife and children, I have no doubt. As to the other points that you made so powerfully, the United States people are out in their millions on demonstrations in every town and city in the United States against the hatefulness of this Trump regime, which is increasingly unprecedented in its savagery, in its barbarism, in its nakedness. You once said here on the show, we use it as a clip, the nakedness of Trump. I mean, it really has to be seen to be believed. There has never been a president of the United States quite so unvarnished, quite so obviously the proverbial ugly American. And the threats that they have issued and the threats that they have already unleashed against friends as well as foes is enough to chill the blood. And I thought one of the most powerful of many powerful points that Jackson Hinkle made just a few minutes ago was his last one. That if everybody doesn't wake up and smell the coffee, if everybody doesn't wake up and smell the stale roast beef smell of Donald Trump, as described by one of the oil executives who sat with him in the White House just the other day, if everybody doesn't wake up, they themselves may end up as his prey. The only way to deal with bullies, with the power and complete abandon of Donald Trump, who has abandoned all morality, law, wiped off the lipstick that's normally there. He is openly acting as a Caligula, a crazed, unhinged emperor, a demented emperor, and I mean demented literally, suffering from dementia. If the top brass in the Pentagon, if the top brass in the State Department, if the top brass in the American legislatures, if the top brass in the American judiciary don't wake up to the madness of Donald Trump, the world could end, and all of their finery and all of their prestige and majesty would come tearing down with it. The legend, May in Oklahoma. Thanks for that call. Some comments. Goran Slash says, it's like Hitler's Olympics in 1936, just before World War II. It's correct. Trump's going to be at all these games. He's going to be there, basking like Hitler in 1936, high on whatever it was that Hitler was high on, and high on whatever it is Donald Trump is high on. It's like the Berlin Olympics. EM says he's not even doing what most imperialists do, bread and circuses and lies. He just says it directly, oil, oil, oil. And Nikia says, if the US government wished to annex Canada, I would have no sympathy for the Canadian government. The Canadian government has been complicit in the crimes against the Palestinians, the Lebanese, the Yemenis, etc. As indeed has Denmark. There has never been a more slavish satrapy than the Kingdom of Denmark. It has delivered its tribute in full to the empire year after year after year. And in the case of the seizure of other people's sovereign territory, Denmark was the first country in the world, as it boasts on its official website, the first country in the world to recognize the fiction called Kosovo, which was stolen from its motherland, Serbia, by NATO in the late years of the last century. Kibris says, Don Rowe, well, that means Turkey should demand Cyprus return to Turkish rule, and elsewhere in the Aegean. The Turks might well settle some scores. The Chinese might settle some scores. If I was Russia, I'd be planning on the settling of some scores to secure their hinterland, their near abroad. After all, if you can annex Denmark, if you can annex Canada, if you can threaten to invade Mexico, if you can threaten to destroy Colombia and Cuba, why should other countries obey international laws that have become effectively defunct. Fix-in man, says Mike Pompeo, tweeted his congratulations to the Mossad agents walking beside the Iranian protesters. He's not making that up. Mike Pompeo actually said, may God bless the protesters in Iran and the Mossad agents walking beside them. He actually said that. France is in Amsterdam on the World Cup, and Malaysia. Franz, welcome.
Evening, George. Evening, George. Good, fabulous to speak with you. I'm originally from Bradford. My ex-missus is from Indonesia. I live in Malaysia. I'm only passing by because I'm seeing my old mum here in Amsterdam. The World Cup. You've got to admit it. They're not going to boycott it. Everybody's just thinking about money. The world's gone completely mad. I actually think that this is the real face of America. I think the Biden that we had before was just a geriatric guy that just hid behind a veil. The Americans are drunk on power. It's not just Trump. Trump is just part of the problem. The only thing I'll say about Trump, and I hate everything about him and everything, I'm a person of color, so I'm a mixed background as well, is that at least we know he's the fascist, he's the racist, because the other people who try to come over like the people of like people like Starmer, who've got no backbone, who say nothing, hypocrites. Yeah, you can kill hundreds of thousands in Palestine with a genocide, but we're supposed to care about Ukraine when they just allow it happen in Palestine. Yes, you complain about Russia, but then America goes into Venezuela. The ironic part is that I used to get preached against by everybody saying, oh, America's our ally. Well, guess what? It looks like China and Russia are better allies for us because America's just stabbing everybody in the back. And the World Cup, as well, George, nobody's gonna go against it. Nobody's gonna do it because everybody thinks about money, and we should all boycott it. Because I love football, I love my fighting, boxing, everything, but I'm not gonna watch any of it. I'll be in Malaysia like you. I hope one day I can meet you, and you're doing a great job, and keep the fight up. Keep the fight up.
God willing, what a call, Franz, and what symmetry between us. Bradford being one of my former parliamentary constituencies of fond memory, married to an Indonesian, and in Malaysia. It is extraordinary, and I'm grateful to you for what you said. The point is not whether they will boycott the World Cup, but whether they should. And the argument that they should is so overwhelming in our poll, and I believe in public opinion, as to make its own point. Of course, the World Cup will not be withdrawn from the United States, but it will be a debacle. It will be potentially an ugly scandal. You recall how the Western media treated little Qatar when it ran an exemplary World Cup. They weren't pro-LGBTQ plus enough. They wouldn't allow you to stagger around drunk, drinking out of beer cans in the street enough. Their stadiums were built with Asian labor that wasn't being paid enough, even though these people support an economic system which has beggared half the world. Qatar was remorselessly pursued. The German team turned up with LGBTQ plus rainbow flags on their arm to embarrass the Qatari hosts. And yet Qatar hosted a perfect, pristine World Cup. I say that as someone not only holding no candle for Qatar, I'm not even allowed to go to Qatar. I have nothing to do with Qatar. But I'm an honest man, you see. And when Qatar ran a perfect World Cup, I said so. Even though if I'd turned up to one of the games, I wouldn't have been allowed into the country. And I say, quite honestly, that the World Cup might coincide with widespread civil conflict in the towns and cities of America, with one of the hosts bombing another of the hosts, and even moving to annex a second of the two co-hosts. That's the travesty that we are now in. Now let me tell you about the podcast. We're in the top 10 for politics in the podcast charts in Gambia, Malta, Egypt, and Croatia this week. These are phenomenal achievements. Gambia in Africa, the George Cross Island of Malta, Egypt, the heart of the Arab world, and Croatia in the Balkans. We're in the top 40 for politics in Sri Lanka, India, and New Zealand. Can you imagine how many podcasts there are in India, and we're charting in the top 40? You can download our podcast by scanning that QR code on your screen now. You can also listen to the weekly podcast on the moats.tv website. Check it out when you go to leave your donation for tonight. Let's go to our old friend, haven't heard him for a while, Melvin in New York on Venezuela. Melvin, welcome back.
Hello, George. Nice to speak to you again. It's been a little while.
And you.
So,
yeah.
In this case, I'd like to cover two parts of Venezuela. First, I do believe that Trump really doesn't have a choice but to go into Venezuela if he wants to have war with Iran, for the very reason that he needs the oil. One of your guys last week, which I wanted to comment on, literally said it. If we go to war with Iran, we don't have oil. So he needs oil to do that, and I think that's one of the reasons he's doing this. One of the other reasons I believe he's doing this, and a lot of Americans don't realize this, is that we'll have refugees come up from Venezuela and South America. And even though he says he wants to close the borders, if you think about it, ICE detention facilities basically use these immigrants as slave labor, which takes jobs away from Americans. Matter of fact, if you look at KFC does a lot of their chicken protests with prisoners, American prisoners. They have for years. So I believe it would take jobs away, but it's actually something he supports because it makes cheaper labor for other countries. And the last thing I will leave on is a quote that I can't remember who said it, but somebody said it once. The more dangerous thing than being America's enemy is to be America's friend. And whatever your thoughts are.
Well, Denmark and Canada are definitely finding that out right now. I won't talk on the second of your points just because of the hour, but on the first, I with respect, have to say to you that I think you're wrong. First of all, Venezuela's crude oil is the crudest oil it's possible to extract. Its viscosity is such that hardly any refineries in the United States or anywhere else can refine it suitably for use as the kind of oil that comes out of the Persian Gulf. It is, in any case, at production levels that are pitifully small. And as the oil executives just told Trump, the level of investment that will be required and the amount of time that it would take to overhaul, renovate the facilities to boost production in Venezuela would be decades, and several decades. I think one of them said it would be 30 years before we turned a profit from the investment that you are asking us to make in Venezuelan oil. So, although Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, its pitiful production levels are not even the 5th, 6th, or 7th highest in the world, and that cannot be effected quickly, particularly when an armed revolution would exist in Venezuela, doing everything that it could to stop the United States using Venezuelan oil as a substitute for Iranian oil. So with respect to you, Melvin, and I love you, I can't accept the first of your 2 points. Let's go to Jeffrey in Philadelphia on Trump. I'm all ears. Jeffrey, what have you got to say about him?
So much, George, for your wonderful show. I really enjoy your outrightness. I consider myself. I used to consider myself as a marker, a supporter of Donald Trump, because this guy was bullied to the point that every day he was in court in the United States, and we sympathize with him. We raised money to help Donald Trump to get in power. Now we realize that he's become one of the worst bullies in the world, and I hate bullies. And I'm telling you the truth, that he lied to us. He wasn't going to start a new war. Now he is fighting war all over this place. So he stole our votes. I'm with like Marjorie Taylor Greene, her concept about MAGA, Tucker Carlson, and Cadence Owen. These are the people that have the real MAGA. We're talking about America first. It's not all over the world supporting like the Jews, the Israelites. They are good people. But when you have a tyrant like Netanyahu coming in and killing people from Palestine, and nothing has been said about it, and you support it, look, you betray our cause. You stole my vote. I should be taking Trump to court in the United States for stealing and lying to the people of the United States. So that's why we are together. See what happened in Minneapolis. A girl was killed for nothing. For what? ICE agent? Now you're talking about deportation. You're taking people from South Africa, those racists. You bring in and giving them a status in the United States, but yet you want to deport other people. That's not fair. So I'm still going to be with the Republican Party. For them, I'm not going to do anything for Trump. Thank you so much, George.
Well, thank you for an absolutely brilliant coruscating call from an original supporter of Donald Trump and of MAGA. Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, all of those, Candace Owens. Candace, I hope, will be on the mother of all talk shows very soon indeed, and we'll be able to talk to her directly about that. Professor Jeffrey Sachs also coming on to the mother of all talk shows at the end of January. These people that you mentioned were the original supporters of America First, of Make America Great Again, not Make America Hated in a way across the entire world that has never hitherto been seen, not making Israel great, not making great the military-industrial complex that is profiting so mightily. Can you imagine? Donald Trump has just increased the arms budget in the United States to $1.5 trillion. Just like that, by fiat. It was already higher than the military budgets of the next 7 countries in the world put together. That's Russia, China, the next 7 countries in the world. It was already higher than 7 of the nearest competitor budget countries. And he's just increased it by 50%. Where's that money going? You think it's going to American workers in Philadelphia? You think it's going to the American farmer? This money is going directly into the pockets of the arms manufacturers and distributors, the brigands, the masters of war, and a lot of it will end up back in the pockets of the Trump Caligula royal family. Jeffrey in Philadelphia, that call of yours will have struck a chord all over the world. Let me take a quick break whilst we get into place with Gayatri in the studio for her social media roundup. Stay tuned. He's a schoolyard bully, Piers Morgan. And he does have a big show, but then he has a big and plush and very well appointed studio and he has a big and very well paid staff. He has a very big budget. He's an extremely wealthy man. And the combination of all of that does give you a certain head start. We, on the other hand, are a mom and pop business. There's just me and Gayatri. And the people who told me the phones are melting are my own grandchildren who are answering the phones for nothing. This is an unpaid gig I'm doing and do twice a week. Nobody pays me one brass farthing to make this show, to present this show. I'm not sure that Piers Morgan would tell you how much he makes.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
And now the woman without whom the news wouldn't be the news. Here's Gayatri. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, we're asking tonight whether we should boycott Trump's World Cup. Should politics affect sports? Can sports be separated from politics? Well, remember in 1962 when Indonesia hosted the Asian Games, but Sukarno refused entry to two countries, which were Israel and Taiwan. And as a response, the International Olympic Committee responded by suspending Indonesia because they said sports and politics cannot be mixed. And so President Sukarno replied, well, the IOC is simply a tool of imperialists and colonialists. And the FIFA today is, of course, no difference. And so that's why the poll tonight is showing overwhelmingly agreement that indeed we should boycott Trump's World Cup. Norse Renegade says, as a native-born Scot who lives here, it pains me to say it, but yes, this country is unsafe for its own citizens, never mind people from abroad. Trump and his brown shirts will arrest you and do not expect to have any access to legal counsel. So stay home and boycott World Cup 2026.
I mean, who's going to be safe around this World Cup? If even a young mother, a white, blonde young mother, can be gunned down, what about the security of people of color? What about the security of Arabs, of Africans, of Asians? You'd be lucky to come out alive if you went to visit the United States to take in the World Cup.
Visit the United States full stop, never mind during the World Cup under Trump.
Yeah, exactly so.
So there you go. And obviously Trump being on a rampage of bombing one country after the other, Gary Masters says, yes, because the way it's going, there won't be any country left that Trump hasn't bombed and therefore is the victim participating at the World Cup. And for fact's sake says, don't even watch football or World Cup, soccer on TV. Don't buy any of their products advertised. Go and support your local amateur and kick the Zios where it hurts, which is in their wallets. Well, as it happens, where we are in Kuala Lumpur, looking out of our window is not just the Twin Towers. Unfortunately, lights already turned off, so not for you to enjoy the view of it as well. We are also looking down at a local stadium, football stadium, of which we have been enjoying the local football taking place from the morning till very late at night. We're about to go to sleep and they're still playing football.
They're still playing football outside in the middle of the night.
And it was better than the Man United game, wasn't it?
Well, it was certainly less painful to watch. I cannot see Diego Dallo in a Manchester United shirt again. I know that will mean nothing to the vast majority of you, but I'm just putting it out there.
Well, and if there's any other football, the one football game event we must watch is the AFCON, which has now reached its final stages, in which we are about to watch this week. Senegal versus Egypt and Nigeria versus Morocco. I mean, AFCON has become a very big event, very big. And the output has been, apart from the sports, to see all these countries from Africa
and
coming
Morocco
together.
has conducted it perfectly. There hasn't been a single problem, as far as I'm aware.
Amazing, amazing. Now, we are, of course, in Malaysia. We were in Indonesia. And we were discussing, you were saying earlier to May how it is to be outside of the UK, and in a way it's refreshing, you know, May and everyone else, because we're in a part of the world that of which the government stands with Palestine, of which the government and its people do not see Russia as the boogeyman. It's refreshing, and this is common amongst all these countries here. And Malaysia in particular, what's so admirable, their passports, if you open their passports, the very first page says, this Malaysian passport is valid everywhere in the world except Israel. They stand steadfast against the Zionist state, apartheid state of Israel, the genociding state of Israel, and steadfast with Palestine. And that's why tonight's meeting was such a success. Tonight's meeting was hosted by members of the cabinet,
the
many
Speaker
dignitaries.
of the Malaysian Parliament was in the front row.
Yep.
And has been following me for years. The Speaker, Mr. Speaker. I said to him, I served under many distinguished and some less distinguished speakers in the British Parliament, and I had good relations with all of them, I like to think, but none of them would have turned up in the front row of a Palestine rally in their capital city. It is interesting what you said there, because you can fly directly to Moscow from Indonesia. You will shortly be able to fly directly from Kuala Lumpur to Moscow on a daily basis. The idea that it is Russia that is isolated in the world is belied just by being here and hearing and feeling the people. Anything else, Gayatri?
Well,
we're ahead.
We are closing indeed, but because we're still in Malaysia and some people have asked, and tonight's meeting was a bit limited, if you are in the KL area, tomorrow, Monday the 12th of January, there's another Palestine rally taking place in the center of Kuala Lumpur, and the details are on stage. It will be hosted at the university, at the IAIS. So these are all the Palestine action groups in Malaysia coming together and hosting a very big event. So
I'm looking forward to it, and I'll be able to be a little more undiplomatic or less diplomatic than I had to be this evening, because obviously the meeting was being hosted by the government of Malaysia itself. This non-government one might allow me to let my hair down a bit if I had any hair. I normally offer to take you for chips, but as it is 5 o'clock in the morning here, I'll just have to invite you for an early breakfast. It's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you. We will still be in Kuala Lumpur for Wednesday's show, but then it's China and maybe also Vietnam. Stay tuned to the mother of all talk shows every Sunday and Wednesday. Good night, good morning, wherever you are.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.